Chase Center is not ready for the version of Golden State that stops tiptoeing around old ghosts and starts making cold, smart, fearless decisions about its future. And if you're here with me right now, it's because you can feel that something different is in the air. This is Warriors News Fan Report. I'm talking directly to you like we're sitting baseline. And I'm here to bring you every real update, every serious rumor, and every layered piece of context around our Golden State Warriors without filters, without panic, with the respect that Dub Nation deserves. Tonight's topic is heavy, emotional, and absolutely necessary. And I want you with me until the end, because what I'm going to break down step by step is not just about one player, it's about identity, leverage, and the possibility that, for the first time in this dynasty, the organization might actually be willing to imagine life after one of its own pillars. Around the league, executives are already reading the signs. The financial pressure of the new CBA is squeezing top-heavy rosters. Golden State has committed major money to Stephen Curry and to maintaining flexibility for the next era. And at the same time, Draymond Green is deep into the veteran stage of his career on a significant long-term deal, still the heartbeat of the defense, still the emotional engine, but carrying more miles on his body, more headlines off the floor, and a style that forces every lineup, every young player, every scheme decision to orbit around him. That tension is not new, but the context is. Right now, this front office is not operating from desperation. They've seen Jonathan Kuminga take a real step as a two-way force. They've seen young pieces grow more assertive. They've explored different looks. They've tasted what it's like to defend, run, and space the floor with more length and versatility. And the message from ownership down is simple. The next version of the Warriors can't just be nostalgia. It has to be sustainable basketball. When you throw in Draymond's history of suspensions, confrontations, and league incidents, and the way those moments have collided with key stretches of seasons, you get exactly why the national conversation keeps circling back to one theme that a few years ago sounded like blasphemy. Is the franchise finally reaching its limit? And before anyone twists this, let me be absolutely clear with you, because here we don't play with cheap clickbait. Draymond Green is one of the greatest competitors this organization has ever had. A Hall of Famer, the defensive brain that turned chaos into championships, the connector who unlocked the Steph system and terrorized the league with his IQ, a core architect of everything that made this dynasty real. That is fact. But it is also a fact that his game has always come packaged with volatility. And that volatility has a different weight when the roster is older, the cap is brutal, and every suspension or availability scare feels less like noise and more like a structural risk to a team trying to squeeze another deep run out of this window while also protecting what comes next. Multiple people around the league have quietly said the same thing for years. Draymond is a winning player in Golden State because Golden State is uniquely built to absorb him. Steph's leadership, Steve Kerr's credibility, the continuity of the locker room, the trust in the system, all of that creates a container that most franchises simply don't have. That container is what allowed the Warriors to ride through the flare-ups, the kicks, the confrontations, the punch on Jordan Poole, the league suspensions, and still hoist banners. That same logic, ironically, is what always made trading him so complicated. His value to Golden State was higher than his value on the open market, where many general managers looked at his on-court genius and off-court volatility and backed away from paying the price the Warriors would demand. Now we enter a different kind of tension point. The new rules punish repeat CAX teams hard. The Warriors' payroll already lives in a neighborhood where every dollar has to translate into wins. Draymond is locked into real money. His age and mileage aren't going backward. At the same time, the franchise is trying to keep enough flexibility to support Steph, to reward ascending guys like Kuminga, to avoid suffocating the roster with contracts that can age poorly. That's the pressure cooker. Add to that the reality that every time Draymond drifts toward controversy, every time his words hit headlines, every time he becomes the center of a league-wide debate, rival executives do exactly what we're doing tonight. They look at Golden State's books, look at the basketball fit, and ask themselves if the moment has finally arrived when the Warriors could listen on their emotional anchor. And here's where I crank this conversation up a notch, because this is where it gets real. Inside the league, nobody is pretending moving Draymond is easy. His contract, his age, and his absolute tie to Steph make any hypothetical move incredibly delicate. But for the first time, the Warriors have genuine alternative paths. They can lean harder into a new defensive core around Kuminga and other emerging pieces, prioritize more switchable size that can shoot, and build lineups that don't need to cover for a non-shooter in the front court every possession. They can recalibrate their identity from "we only function with Draymond at the controls" to "we have multiple ways to win," which, let's be real, has been the missing piece in recent playoff exits where spacing shrank, offense is loaded up, and there wasn't always a plan B when the old formula stalled. That does not mean they've decided anything. It does mean that what used to be untouchable is now at least a topic on the whiteboard. When you consider potential constructs, they all revolve around one core idea. If Golden State ever goes there, they cannot move Draymond for air. The only version that makes sense is one where they come away with either a legitimate front court partner who brings both size and spacing, or a combination of younger two-way pieces plus picks that help bridge the gap between the end of the Curry era and whatever comes next. Front offices aren't blind. They remember how he anchored historically great defenses, how he still quarterbacks coverages, how his chemistry with Steph is unique. But they also see the suspension history, the tension moments, the technical accumulation risk, and they understand that if they are trading for Draymond, they're not just buying a player, they're importing an entire ecosystem. That's why the asking price and the real market have never matched in the past. So why are we even talking about him potentially being out now? Because the balance between cost, volatility, and alternatives has shifted just enough to put pressure on both sides. Draymond wants to compete for titles and keep his voice. The Warriors want his edge without living terrified of the next explosion. The league framework punishes sentimental overspending. Young players in the system are proving they can handle more responsibility. All these small changes stack into one big question. At what point does loyalty stop being an asset and start becoming a shield against hard decisions? Watching the early season patterns, the rotations, the minute management, the front office language about depth, versatility, and long-term planning, you can feel that Golden State is actively managing life with Draymond instead of blindly centering everything around him. That is subtle, but huge. And now I'm going to say the sentence that a lot of you saw in the title and thought was pure madness. Yes, there is a real, non-ridiculous scenario in which Draymond Green plays his last games as a Warrior, and the franchise chooses to move on if the right offer, the right timing, and the right internal temperature all line up. That is the real climax of this story. Not because something is signed, not because there's a secret trade sitting in an email, but because structurally, for the first time, the logic exists for both sides. For Golden State, a move like that could open minutes and usage for Kuminga and other forwards, bring in more shooting, reduce tax pressure, and reframe the locker room around a calmer, more sustainable competitive edge while Steph still has fuel in the tank. For Draymond, it could mean landing in a situation where his voice is wanted for one last hard push, where he's not carrying a decade of local baggage into every headline, where a contender bets big on his mind and his fire for a short, focused run, and where every outburst, every scream, every defensive read is interpreted through fresh eyes instead of the long history that people in the Bay replay in slow motion. It could be the kind of reset where a front office brings him in with total clarity. We know exactly who you are, we're signing up for all of it, and a locker room that needs that shock of accountability. That guy who points, yells, calls out coverages, and isn't afraid to tell a star he's messing up a rotation. In that kind of environment, his intensity stops feeling like a ghost from old titles and becomes a clear, time-limited weapon. 2 years, 1 window, 1 mission. And before anyone clips this out of context, right now he is under contract with the Warriors and nothing official signals his exit. I'm not here to invent facts or dress rumor up his guarantee. I'm here to explain why the possibility of him being out is no longer just a troll take thrown on social media. It's a scenario that passes through the filter of money, age, roster evolution, and league perception. The fact that we can have this conversation with a straight face already tells you how far this era has traveled, how much the ground has shifted under a dynasty that once felt untouchable. So let me take this a step deeper with you, because if we're going to touch this nerve, we're going to do it with basketball, not soap opera. Picture what it really looks like on the floor if the Warriors choose the path where Draymond is no longer the automatic closer at the 5, and eventually no longer in the building at all.
You unlock a full runway for Kuminga to grow into a true two-way star instead of a side character forced into awkward spacing. You can lean into modern five-out setups with bigs who actually drag defenders out of the paint, wings who live attacking clean gaps, and lineups where Steph's gravity is amplified by four legitimate scoring threats, instead of being partially absorbed by a defender camping off a non-shooter. You stretch defenses horizontally and vertically, open up new angles for drive and kick, reduce how often teams get away with loading two off the nail and daring one guy to shoot. It's not about erasing what Draymond does, it's about recognizing that as he gets older, his limitations scream louder in playoff basketball, and top teams in the West have gotten sharper at weaponizing those weak points in 7-game series. Denver, OKC, Minnesota, and others know how to shrink the floor, park size and help, invite him to shoot, and turn those minutes into a math problem the Warriors have to solve possession after possession. The question for the front office isn't whether Draymond can still make winning plays. He can. It's whether they want to keep building entire postseason game plans around compensating for an aging non-shooter in a cap environment that punishes every inefficiency at the top of your sheet. From the cap side, stepping away in the right deal doesn't just tweak rotations, it recalibrates the entire project. More space to secure the next generation, less suffocating repeater pressure, more honest competition for minutes instead of lifetime appointments, the freedom to chase size, shooting, and switchability that match where the league is going instead of where it was in 2016. A move that big would cut deep emotionally. It would feel like chipping away at a statue that every Warriors fan carries in their memory. But dynasties don't die because they make one ruthless decision at the right time. They die because they dodge all of them until it's too late and everybody realizes at once that the window closed 3 years ago. On Draymond's side, he's way too smart not to sense this climate. He knows the league is constantly recalculating his value against his volatility. If an exit ever happens, it's not some punishment or banishment. It's a calculated play with eyes wide open. It only makes sense if he lands with a real contender that has the infrastructure to handle everything he brings and actually needs that edge. A coach who can hold him, veterans who won't fold, and a clear role where he's asked to organize, defend, and lead without carrying the weight of an entire era's scars. That list of teams is short, and that's one of the main reasons the odds remain low even as the theory grows stronger and more logical. Inside the Bay, the staff also weighs all the invisible things that don't fit on any spreadsheet. Him calling coverages before the offense has even crossed half court. Him setting the emotional temperature on defense so everyone else follows. The way Steph trusts him blindly in actions no other teammate reads the same way. The way his presence can still flip a game's physicality in 3 possessions. You don't replace that with a 3-and-D big bullet point. You only walk away if what comes back brings its own version of winning impact. Even if the shape is different, more shooting, more length, more reliability, fewer nights where you're holding your breath about availability. That's the standard I'm putting on the table here. We're not talking lazy trade machine fantasy for views. We're talking about a real internal exam of whether this organization is brave enough to evolve while still honoring the soul that built this run. So here's my clear verdict before I hand this to you. The idea of Draymond Green being out of the Warriors is no longer pure noise in the timeline. It's a strategic option living on the edge of reality. And it only becomes acceptable if the return keeps Golden State firmly in the contender lane, protects the last great years of Steph Curry, and opens a clean, realistic path to the next version of this team. If that kind of monster package doesn't appear, then the smartest move is simple. You keep him, you manage him better, you demand discipline, you lean on his defensive genius and ride this core for one more honest shot, fully aware of the risk and fully aligned on the rules. Below that bar, you don't flinch. Above that bar, you're allowed to at least consider closing the book on one of the most complex, brilliant, and combustible runs any player has ever had with a single franchise. Now, I want you inside this decision with me. Drop in the comments if you'd ever pull the trigger, what type of package would actually justify it in your eyes, or if you believe Draymond has to finish this journey in blue and gold no matter what. And if you want every serious rumor, every subtle locker room sign, and every tough conversation about our Warriors broken down with honesty, detail, and the passion of someone who lives this with you, Make sure you're subscribed, hit like, turn on all notifications, and stay close because here on Warriors News Fan Report, I'm right next to you for every chapter of whatever comes next.